Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, I'm a physical therapist. I have my doctor of physical therapy. I've been treating in the clinic since 2018. I did my orthopedic residency and I'm an orthopedic clinical specialist. I have a huge passion for educating people on how to stay healthy so they can enjoy the quality of life for a lot longer. So staying active, staying mobile, staying strong, all of that stuff. And in this video, we are going to talk about 5 tips to help prevent injury. But really, I kind of wanted to first address, can you actually prevent injury? Or is that just like a marketing thing or a wishful thinking thing? Unfortunately, life does happen and we can't necessarily guarantee prevention of injury. We can reduce the risk of injury with your training, but we can't necessarily say you are going to guarantee no injury ever by doing these things. That's not really how life works, unfortunately. Essentially, every activity or every action or every thing that you do has an inherent demand of that activity. And you have a certain capacity of your muscles, joints, body, all of that stuff. You want to make sure that the demand here does not exceed the capacity, right? So you want your capacity to be above the demand for the activity, and you want to have a huge, or as big of a gap as you can to reduce that risk of injury. This can be a capacity and demand for mobility. It can be a capacity and demand for coordination, power, strength. All of the components that make up that activity have the certain capacity as well. And if you exceed a certain capacity, then you're going to increase your risk of injury. If it's like a slight increase, then it might be just like a strain or something like that. The higher, then the more severe the injury. I kind of thought of the analogy of like a glass of water. And so your glass symbolizes the capacity that you have. You want to make sure that the glass does not overflow. The thing is, from day to day, your glass can get bigger or smaller based on several factors. So hydration, sleep, recovery, when the last time you worked out was, all of these things can contribute to how big your cup is that day. You might have a certain amount of water that gets put in because you're doing a certain skill or certain activity, and your glass may or may not be able to handle it that day. So do keep in mind that hydration, stress levels, whether it's like physical stress that you put on your body or mental stress or life stress as well, all play a role, hydration, etc., so forth. Essentially, you need a big enough glass to start with. That way, when it shrinks and grows and all of that stuff, you still have that capacity for that activity that you're trying to do. And to make your glass bigger or to increase your capacity, you do that for specific training according to your goals or according to that activity that you're wanting to do. So I kind of briefly already mentioned this, but the first tip that I have for you is to manage your rest and recovery. So make sure you have adequate rest and recovery because that's going to impact your capacity for that day. So sleep, hydration, nutrition, rest time, stress, all impact your capacity. And so when you sleep more, then your capacity for that day is going to be bigger. And that way you have more of a barrier in between the capacity and the demand of that activity. Where if you didn't sleep well, maybe your capacity is here and the demand of that activity is here. And if you do that repeatedly over time, then it's not gonna be very good. You want a bigger reserve, so the bigger reserve, the better. The second tip that I have for you is to not do things that you're not ready for. Again, if you're not ready for it, you don't have that capacity for it, and so your demand is going to exceed your capacity, and it's gonna increase your risk of injury. Don't be like me, for example, for when I started training muscle-ups. They were sloppy, I was chicken winging them. I did not have enough of I didn't have enough strength to pull high enough to be able to transition over top of the bar. I didn't understand that technique, etc., so forth. To this day, I think that was partly the reason why I ended up having to have shoulder surgery because I exceeded the capacity that I'd had at that time because I was training something that I wasn't ready for. Same thing with handstands, for example. You need 180 degrees of shoulder motion, so you need your shoulder motion to be able to get overhead here. You don't want to be here because then you're going to have to arch your back to get all the way up there. You need that prerequisite motion so you have that capacity for that activity. My third tip for you is to ensure muscular balance. So what does that mean? It essentially means that you want to make sure you're not biasing one group of muscles over another. So a lot of people, they work the chest and neglect the back. You want to make sure there's balance in between those two muscle groups and all muscle groups so that one part or group of the muscles aren't overactive and the others underactive, because that just creates imbalance and puts additional stresses on your joints and muscles and all of that stuff. So like one group of muscles might have the capacity for something and then the other one might not. But you think you do because you're training and you're like overall pretty strong, but that muscle group doesn't have that capacity. Another example is with runners. You're doing a lot of forward and backward motion with running, but you neglect the side to side motion, and that's really important with like hip stability, health, back, knees, ankles, all of that stuff. That side to side strength is going to be important to propel you forward, because it is stability of your hips, because essentially you don't want them dropping from side to side, and it's those side muscles that help stabilize. And like, yes, you can kind of see that with the hips, but it's also important with other muscles and joints in the body. So take that and apply that to other areas of the body too. The fourth tip I have for you is to make sure you have a movement diet. So what is a movement diet? It's essentially like similar to your nutritional diet. You want to have your nutrition coming from a variety of sources, so it's balanced and you're getting a little bit of everything. Same thing with movement. You don't want to do like the same movement over and over again. You don't want to be sitting in the same position all of the time, etc. so forth. Variety is the spice of life for movement as well as food. So think about your workouts. Do you incorporate a push, a pull, a rotation, or are you just doing like a ton of pushes, for example? You want to make sure you're not getting stuck in one movement pattern and you're switching it up. Not necessarily every single time, but overall balance between like across your week. You can have the same breakfast every day, for example, but you want to make sure you're having different like lunches and dinners from a variety of sources. Same thing with certain things. You can do the same exercise, but you also want to like add some variety here and there too. Think about like sitting at a desk all day. You're kind of like hunched over in this posture here, looking at your computer. Your neck might get tight, your back might get tight, your chest might get tight. It's not necessarily that posture that's bad, but are you able to get into and out of that position? That's where it comes in, where you have the movement diet. So maybe you're here, you're eating a lot of sweets, right? Maybe adding some vegetables in. I don't know if this analogy makes any sense, but maybe adding like some vegetables and maybe some like leaning back, maybe some scapular retractions, things like that can help balance things out a little bit and making sure you're getting the nutrients for your movement diet too. The fifth tip I have for you is to listen to your body. Your body is constantly giving you cues on what it needs, and it's your job to listen to it. So if you're a little bit stiff from like sitting around a little bit more, maybe adding a little bit more mobility before you do your strength training is smart. Maybe if you're a little bit more sore from your training day the day before, you might add a little bit of an extra warm-up, or maybe take it a little bit easy, maybe go for a walk and do some mobility instead of a hard training session. That way you can do a hard training session the following day. Being smart about your training and listening to your cues is super important to prevent injury. Sleep can play a role. So if you're super tired, then you might not have the coordination that you normally have, and it might not be the smartest thing to maybe try something super complex. Maybe just wait to the next day until you get a better night's sleep, for example. You just want to make sure you have that capacity, and your body is telling you if you have that capacity or not. But hopefully my like water and glass and capacity demand analogy made sense. Let me know if it made sense to you below, or if you have any additional questions or anything like that. I'm always happy to help. If you are looking for training programs to increase your capacity, go ahead and check out my website, or if you are interested in an individualized program, I do offer that as well. If you do want some just follow along workouts, I'm going to go ahead and link the playlist here to follow along with some of the workouts that I have on YouTube already.